By 1985, manager Frank Murray wanted to turn them into an international act. It was time to visit America. Shane had never visited before, but it was a place that was already alive in his imagination, through films, books and music. The experience of touring America would inspire the Pogues' greatest song.
Shane was pretty obsessed with America. He'd never been before the band went, so he had this whole mythological America in his mind from films and books and music and so on.
New York turned out to be pretty much the way I imagined it would be, you know.
Fact and fiction merged into one on the tour bus.
Shane and Spider were totally into Once Upon a Time in America, and we're in character the whole time.
We were watching that sort of like round the clock for the purposes of memorising the script.
It was just motherfucker this and motherfucker that.
This previously unseen footage of their first American concert was shot by Pogues fan Peter Doherty.
And this is 2nd Street, and just here on the corner is what used to be a club called The World. That's where I first saw the Pogues. They played there, the first gig in America as far as I know, and it was fantastic. I do remember having a good time, and I remember the woman I was with was saying, let's go. Why do you want to go backstage and say hello? I mean, like, what's your problem? Why would you want to talk to them?
But Peter did go backstage, and another part of the Fairytale of New York jigsaw was in place. Peter would go on to direct the song's video, and he was about to meet its Hollywood star.
Matt Dillon was in the dressing room. I took, there wasn't that much interest in me.
Backstage was packed with celebrity fans, many of them Irish-American.
It was the kind of thing that I liked. It sort of was, you know, it reminded me of like the Dubliners or the Clancy Brothers mixed with the Clash. Immediately, I was a big fan.
The Pogues' blend of nostalgia and punk had struck a chord with Irish-Americans like Matt Dillon and Peter Doherty. At the same time, Shane MacGowan had been inspired by stories of ancestors who had struggled to make a new life thousands of miles away from Ireland.
In Ireland, like, you're either dead or in America. If you're in America, you're not coming back.
3 years before the Pogues' trip to America, Kirsty MacColl had caught the eye of the man who would go on to produce Fairytale of New York.
I first met Kirsty MacColl when I was producing Simple Minds. She came down to do some backing vocals, and she was a big fan of Simple Minds, and she was out there doing the vocals, and I thought, I'm going to marry that girl.
The couple were married within months. Kirsty's career was also going well, thanks to a string of bittersweet songs about relationships.
A lot of her songs were quite vitriolic about men. And people would always say, oh, is that song about you? And I go, no. And she'd always say, they're not about anyone. They're about mixtures of people I meet. And, you know, great social comment, a great girl's girl.
While Kirsty was getting married, the Pogues were getting famous.
The Pogues were growing all the time, you know. They just kept going from strength to strength.
Every time, like, we caused enough damage to get barred from a club, you know, we moved up a notch, you know.
But the band needed a big single to break into the mainstream.
So I just thought, well, it'd be really interesting to see what they do with a Christmas song. So that's why I asked them initially to do it, and we were supposed to be covering a song.
Instead of looking for a song to cover, banjo player Jem Finer and Shane attempted to write a duet, but at the time they didn't have Kirsty MacColl in mind. It was written for the Pogues' female bassist, Cotta Reardon.
She was a great singer, and she had an amazing pair, and she was a beautiful looking young girl, like, and none of the rest of us were by any stretch of the imagination. Yeah.
Jem started with a traditional approach.
I wrote one Christmas duet, which had, it's really, actually the words were crap and the whole idea behind it was sort of sentimental Christmas rubbish.
He came up with something more Pogue-like about the couple down on their luck at Christmas, then took it to Shane, who came up with the New York connection.
We decided to make it about two Irish immigrants on the way out, they'd had their glory days in well, it explains it in the song, yeah?
And here exclusively is the demo of Fairytale of New York. It also features original vocalist Cotter Reardon. With the song taking shape and demos laid down with producer Elvis Costello, all that remained was the final recording session and the small matter of a title.
And Costello said, what are you going to call it? Christmas Eve in the drunk tank? With amazing imagination. That guy. No, that's not pretentious enough, I thought, yes, Fairytale of New York. I was looking at the book cover, yeah? Fairytale of New York,
Fairytale of New York was written by Irish-American J.P. Donlevy in 1973. It's a story of a young man who arrives in America from Ireland. Shane met Donlevy in Dublin.
He explained to me that his father was a big fan of mine and read most of the books, I believe, and he did this as a favor to his father, in effect, to recognize the fact that his father read my books and was a fan. I was surprised. I thought it was a really striking piece of music with wonderful overtones, and I realized straight away that it didn't really have anything to do with my book at all.
The Pogues' Christmas single was really coming together. It had lyrics, a tune and a title. But despite repeated attempts, they weren't happy with the recordings.
The song wasn't really whole. It was just like it was a great song, but we hadn't given much thought to it,
The band just couldn't play it very well either. And I think time kind of ran out. I wasn't going to... So if you're going to have a Christmas song, it has to be out for Christmas.
To the land where it's farthest away. 15 minutes later,
the band went back on the road, becoming tighter and more ambitious. But they kept working on their Christmas single.
We'd start to put it in the set, so it became a different song, very tight.
But the constant touring was too much for bassist Cotter Reardon. She married producer Elvis Costello and decided to leave the band.
That was extremely distressing because they didn't really know what to do. I mean, they deputised Darryl, and it worked, but I think it was just basically from partying too hard.
The band replaced their bassist, but in 1986, Fairytale had lost its female voice.
It was never going to be scrapped. It was just, I know, Shane was always tinkering.
No, I was trying to finish the bloody song.
Whenever we got together to rehearse and there was a new fiddle about, we'd try and play it again.
Shane finally nailed the lyrics in Scandinavia after a bout of pneumonia.
You get lots of delirium and stuff, yeah? And so I got quite a few really good images out of that,
The Pogues' New York Christmas epic was about to be recorded, but when they arrived at the studio in the summer of 1987, there was still no female vocalist to sing alongside Shane.
When we started recording it, it was still there written as a duet, but we didn't have anyone really lined up as such to sing it.
Despite this, the band went into the studio in London with their new producer, Steve Lillywhite. Steve was used to working with stadium rock acts like Simple Minds and U2, not with penny whistles and banjos.
If you would have said like 18 months beforehand we'd get Steve Lillywhite, it would have been a no. We wouldn't have thought of using Steve, you know. But somehow when the band came off that sort of like 18 months of touring and they had become this really, really tight unit.
I knew I was getting a band who were at their best. You know, I think I was very lucky to get them when I got them because there was a great feeling of momentum towards the Pogues. And I helped ride that crest.